What's up, everybody? Welcome here to Pop Culture Philosophers. In particular, welcome to PCP Movie Night as we start the final week of Horrorfest 2025. And we're doing it with a banger tonight. We're talking about Dracula's Daughter, the only direct sequel to 1931's Todd Browning directed Dracula, starring Bela Lugosi. This movie came out in 1936. It stars Gloria Holden as the titular character. Very excited to dive into this. We covered this one 6 years ago. I did like a live movie commentary to it. So if you want to visit that after this show, maybe you should check that out because we had a great conversation about Dracula's Daughter. Then it was just me talking about the movie, but now I've got a panel. Y'all, thank you for being here for this special Sunday night. We have entered the Horrorfest gauntlet. There's going to be a show tonight. There's a show tomorrow night. There's 2 shows on Tuesday. There's a show on Wednesday. There's a show on Thursday. And we're going to let you just rest and enjoy Halloween on your own. But this is the final week of Horrorfest 2025. We got a great panel here to kick off this final week, including my man Brooks. What's up, homie?
What's up?
How you doing? You've seen this movie before, right?
Yeah. I've watched it before. I got a Dracula kind of collection with pretty much all the old Universal Dracula films, and it was on there. So I watched it. And yeah, actually, this is like an underrated one, I think.
Yeah, I think it's severely underrated. Yeah. Speaking of underrated, it's our man Fable. What is up, homie? And thank you so much, man. I had half my panel drop out tonight, and Fable said, "You know what? I'll be the superhero." He fit this movie in today, and he fit this the show in tonight. So, Fable, thank you so much for being here.
Of course, man. The last week of Horrorfest, I couldn't resist. I had to come on, and just to let you know, I'm completely overrated. Let's be real here.
We all are, really. Have you ever seen this movie before?
No, man. I'm not the big Universal Monsters guy like you guys, man. I never really grew up on these movies. And I've seen the few I've seen are from you guys.
All right. Yeah, you grew up on shit like Chud.
Yeah, Chud, exactly.
Speaking of Chuds, here's our resident Chud on the panel. This is one of his, not only is it his first time watching this movie, this might be the 5th horror film he's ever watched in his life. I don't know. But it's Greg from Bearded Comic Bro.
What's up? Yeah, I had never seen this before, so no, you're getting the first reactions. I will say, Robbie knows this, but I did watch Dracula first because I was like, I want to do justice to the movie, and so I'm like, I'm gonna watch the sequel, even though Robbie said I wouldn't have to. I'd be able to pick it up fine, and I wanted to do it. So I did see Dracula first because I hadn't seen that yet.
Well, I really appreciate it, man, and this is definitely a different movie than City of the Living Dead, right?
So much different. Like there's a story here like that. There is a start, a middle, and an end that like makes comprehensible sense. So that's already up a notch compared to the other.
Nobody
movies.
Throwing up literally all their guts though, but you know,
you're right.
It's going to take like 50 years to get to that point in cinema. So let's talk about it. 1936, Dracula's Daughter. So Universal Monsters, or the Universal Films, right? Carl Laemmle Jr. was running it. He was a big fan of horror. His father was not. But he convinced his dad, we should start doing horror films. So they did like Phantom of the Opera with Lon Chaney. They did Hunchback of Notre Dame with Lon Chaney. And then the very first supernatural talkie horror film was Dracula, directed by Todd Browning in 1931, followed up by Frankenstein. Then The Mummy by Carl Freund. James Whale, of course, did Frankenstein. And the first sequel that Universal ever did to one of their monster films was Bride of Frankenstein in 1935. We've covered that on the channel. Probably the greatest horror sequel of all time, and probably one of the best horror comedies of all time. So in 1936, after the success of Bride of Frankenstein, they gave the sequel treatment to Dracula, finally, with Dracula's Daughter. Now, this movie was initially, I think it was going to be produced by MGM or something like that. They had bought the rights to Bram Stoker's short story Dracula's Guest, which is it was a chapter of the original Dracula novel that was edited out, right? And then later, shortly after his death, it was published as a short story. So MGM made a deal with Stoker's widow to do Dracula's Guest. They turned it into Dracula's Daughter. The script was different. They didn't know where they wanted to go with it. Universal eventually got those rights from MGM, but they had to make a movie by a certain time or they were going to lose the rights. So this is like a 90s Hellraiser, Children of the Corn kind of situation, or a Fox Fantastic Four kind of situation where they're like, fuck it, let's just make this shitty ass Fantastic Four movie because otherwise we're going to lose the rights, right? So when they started making this movie, they didn't even have a completed script yet, man. And a lot of it's based on, they say, Dracula's Guest, but it bears very little resemblance to that. It's more influenced by Carmilla, aka Carmilla, which is like an 1800s. It was a it's actually predates Dracula as one of the first gothic vampire novels, and it really leads into like the lesbian same-sex kind of idea that does get explored out here just a little bit. This movie is rather famous for being one of the first movies to have a very overt same-sex seduction scene in the movie. Now we watch it today and it's very tame, right? But back then, people were clutching pearls. They were fucking passing out. Who knows, man? Like they were freaking out about this movie.
The vapors were had.
Yeah, right. I love Dracula's Daughter, though. I don't think it's quite. So you can tell that they are trying to mimic the success of James Whale's Bride of Frankenstein with the humor, with the characters and all this kind of stuff, right? It doesn't quite work as well as that movie to me, as the Bride of Frankenstein. It doesn't quite work as well because James Whale had this like uncanny ability to do truly macabre and horrific things and at the same time make it light and bouncy and fun, like Bride of Frankenstein, of course, Invisible Man, The Old Dark House. These movies are
all movies I've seen.
Yeah, okay. Well, Greg, I hope you're writing this shit down because but no, Dracula's Daughter, I love it. I got it in this Blu-ray set. I got the DVD Dracula set. I got it on VHS. Thank you, Two Gun Pedro, for that because Universal Monsters on VHS. But I love the film. I think it's underrated, but it's at times capable of being slightly overrated. Like I said, it's not Bride of Frankenstein. It doesn't mesh perfectly. It's horror and comedic elements, right? It's trying to do that, but it doesn't work as well. James Whale was a director unlike anybody else, right? Now, James Whale was initially supposed to do this film. Like they had set him up to do this film, but he was waiting on an actress to finish a movie so that he could do Showboat, which, by the way, if you've never seen James Whale's Showboat, which is a musical, fucking check it out. It's really good. But he didn't really want to do this movie. In fact, most of the people involved in this movie didn't want to do it. Gloria Holden was so scared of doing this movie and actually kind of almost resented the part because she saw what happened to Bela Lugosi. He played Dracula, and for the previous 5 years since that film had been released, he was typecast and he couldn't get movie roles outside of Dracula type characters. So she was really worried about that. But I think that disdain for this picture actually adds a level to her performance. And I think the performances are great. I think the script is great. Like I said, it's not on Bride of Frankenstein's level. And is it fair to compare it to Bride of Frankenstein? I think so, because it's definitely trying to ape on the success of that film and also be a direct sequel to the original Dracula, which Bride of Frankenstein was a sequel to the original Frankenstein, right? And this actually was the end of that first wave of Universal monster movies. After this, Carl Laemmle had lost control of the studio. He had like borrow $1 million to keep the studio afloat. When the loan was called in, he wasn't able to pay it. So another group of people came in and took over the movie. And the guy who took over the studio, don't remember his name right now, hated horror films. And it was like 1939 until they did another horror movie, which was Son of Frankenstein. That was a big year in cinema. We had Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, Son of Frankenstein, which is actually a really good movie. Boris Karloff's final performance as the monster. Also the same year as The Wizard of fucking Oz. That's crazy to think about how long ago these movies were, but how timeless they are. But I'm a fan of this movie. Brooks will know this. I have written a story called Chloe. It's a vampire story. I wrote this like 25 years ago for the first one, right? The main character, Chloe, is pretty much based a lot on Dracula's daughter in this movie. So I like the film. I think it's underrated, but I do think it's not quite perfect. So let's get into it. Brooks, you've seen it before. You got some thoughts. What do you think about Dracula's Daughter? By the way, you out there in the chat, we appreciate seeing you. Metal Elf, Dr. Doom's Fan Club, Two Gun Pedro. Who else we got? We got Cliff in here. We got a sexy ass chat in the panel right now. I think we got 9-panel grid popped in at some point. He's probably already gone. He's just popped in and say what's up. Anyway, Brooks, Dracula's Daughter. What do you think overall?
Yeah, like I agree with you. Like it's not Bride of Frankenstein level, but still, like I think it's a pretty solid sequel, I think, to Dracula. And it brings back Van Helsing, which is cool. It's cool to see Van Helsing again.
Do you like how they changed his name? Did you notice that?
No, they did?
He's
Von.
Von Helsing in this. There was some kind of thing where they couldn't use names of character or any of the characters from the original Dracula novel. So they call him Von Helsing. They keep saying that. I'm just like, what the? We know it's Van Helsing. It's the same actor. Anyway, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, I like that he has like legal troubles now because he basically murdered this dude. Technically, I guess, but his defense is like, well, he was dead 500 years. How could I have murdered him?
Great defense, by the way.
Yeah, but I like that. They're trying to do something different with the vampire kind of thing, and I think the character is very she's very compelling. The actress is very intense in this movie, I guess, and she's not playing. It doesn't feel like she's trying to play like Lugosi, but she has a little bit of that kind of Lugosi intensity. They still do the stare, the bright lights on the face, and I think she pulls it off really good. So yeah, it has it's a bit slow at times, but still it does feel like a very Dracula movie, but it's different. She's a different kind of monster because she's like, unlike Dracula, she seems to be more like not quite repentant, but she wants to live a normal life, I guess. She doesn't want to be like like Dracula was. So yeah, you can kind of see the archetype of this the female vampire in this movie in different monster movies. I think they kind of moved away from it more into the sexy lady vampire these days. But still, it is very much baked into, I think, into the DNA of what we think of when we think of like a female vampire. Is because she's so regal, she's so like proper, but she's like powerful and predatory. So yeah, this movie, I think it definitely has its place. It may not be as popular as Dracula or the Mummy or Frankenstein, but it definitely has had its effect, I think, on the kind of whole horror movie monster mythos. So.
Oh yes, absolutely. The influence of this film still reverberates today, right? Mm-hmm. In fact, Universal was going to remake this movie. Universal's they're little, they know that they had the first cinematic universe with the Universal monster movies, right? And then with the rise of the MCU and Harry Potter and all these other things that like Hunger Games, these franchises, these connected worlds, they've tried to launch like a new Universal Monsters universe multiple times, right? They tried it with Van Helsing, the Hugh Jackman film. They failed there. They tried it with Dracula Untold. They failed there. They tried it with the Tom Cruise, The Mummy, which, by the way, blows. That movie sucks. You know what I'm saying? By the way, the Stephen Sommers Mummy movies rock. Those first two, especially Mummy and Mummy Returns. But Stephen Sommers did Van Helsing. Didn't quite work, but I actually like that film. But Dracula's Daughter, there is a legacy that is built from this. And like Anne Rice quotes this movie as being a direct inspiration to her Vampire Chronicles novels. I quote this movie as a direct inspiration to the story that I wrote, Chloe, right? And it has a reverberating effect throughout cinema because it was ahead of its time, but at the same time, it was trying to be a mimic of something that was successful the year before. But I also like what you said, how it takes a different approach to the vampire. Dracula is Dracula. He loves it. Dracula's dead end loving it, as Mel Brooks would say, right? But Dracula's daughter is conflicted. She doesn't want to be this person. And she's got that evil fucking dude with the worst haircut in cinema history, right? Xandar.
Way different.
He's like tempting her so bad. He's like, is the sound of evil. The sound like, I fucking love that shit. Babel, you didn't even expect that you were going to be here. You've never seen this movie. It got thrown on you. You accepted the challenge. What do you think about Dracula's Daughter?
I thought it was okay. It's not as boring as I thought it was. Brooke said it's a little slow, but I liked it. It's funny that you say it's a horror with comedic elements. I took it as a vampire love story. I didn't see the comedy or the horror in it. I saw, that they were trying to do this love story, and I also, to riff off of Brooks, the influence. I totally saw this in The Hunger. The lady vampire from The Hunger, the head vampire, she reminds me of this lady a lot. But I thought it was pretty good. I liked how it just like continues, like assuming, because I don't think I've seen Dracula, the original Bela Lugosi Dracula. Assuming it's based on Bram Stoker's Dracula.
I have.
It's cool that they just like pick up exactly where it leaves off, like Back to the Future Part 2. You know what I mean? It's like guy just finished stabbing Dracula, the police arrive, and then we just continue the film. So I like that aspect of it. But yeah, no, I thought it was enjoyable. It's a little over an hour, which I'm a big fan of, in and out. But yeah, no, it's pretty cool. I always like seeing these older movies just to see where everything comes from. I also caught the sense, like you were saying, about the risque nature of it. Especially when she invited the girl over to her house to pose for her, and she was taking off her blouse, and I'm like, wait a minute, could they do that back in 36? And you know what I mean? You kind of saw her
They could do it in 36, but not 37, bro.
Abel was clutching his pearls. He's like,
I was like, wait, am I going to see some nips over here? Am I going to see a titty line or something? She's taking off her thing. She's clutching her shit. So I'm like, all right. They're getting a little sexy here. So I found that a lot very interesting. But yeah, no, it was a decent flick. Definitely glad I watched it.
Hell yeah, man. I'm happy to hear that. Yeah, very risque at the time. That scene, and also just like the how much of Dracula's daughter, what's her name? Count, like always forget it's like Count Zaleska or something like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it is Zaleska, right?
Yeah.
Like seeing her back, like sometimes it's easy for us to like watch movies and be like, what's the big deal about it, right? But like back then, dude, people were just like, oh my god, they're like that British fucker in this movie, right? Like he's one of the comedic elements. The guy just like, what's going on, Dr. Goth? Like he's just like this weird like British character.
They all had low cut dresses. All of them had low cut dresses throughout the movie. And then there was that particular number where the Dracula's daughter had that like dress that wrapped around her chest, kind of.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, she's not wearing a bra.
Speaking of not wearing a bra, Greg, this was your first time watching this movie. It might be the 6th horror film you've ever seen.
Yeah.
What'd you think about it, especially after watching Dracula for the first time, which you're one up on Fable, which is crazy.
Yeah. I thought it was an interesting, perspective to come into it, because like I have no history, no love for the Universal monster movies. This is, I mean, you told me coming into it, like, this is going to be more up my alley of a movie than the first thing you made me watch, the Italian zombie movie.
City of the Living Dead, which,
I've already forgotten what it's called.
Never start with Italian horror, Greg. That's the rule.
Listen, I started with what Robbie gave me. So that's like, Robbie's like, oh, you're new to comics? Here, read Watchmen as your first thing ever to read. Only this Watchmen's good. So it's just a different perspective. But like for me, like it's interesting because it's listed as this horror movie. Like there's very little horror elements in my mindset of watching this, right? Like so I was like, oh, like there's at least in Dracula there was more of the gothic feel of the castle throughout it. You have this is really, for the most part, kind of like a seductive, like lawyer-esque, kind of like how we get him out of jail kind of thing. So I found that perspective interesting because I was like, oh, this isn't what I was expecting, hopping on like a horror movie and just seeing one where it was like literally their guts are spilling out and brains are just being like clawed out the back of their heads. So I was like, this is an interesting perspective. There was some frustration for me having just watched Dracula to then go into this because, you know, the whole premise of Van Helsing not, you know, it's like, well, I stabbed him. And they're like, oh, well, there literally were two other people in the room with him that walked out the stairs at the end of Dracula.
Those motherfuckers saw the police and they just ditched them, man.
Like, no. Like, you literally have two key eyewitnesses that were in the whole movie of Dracula that are just like, nah, deuces, we're not even going to pop in. Our friend who saved our lives is in trouble with the Scotland Yard. And we're just going to, like, you know, and I'm sure it has to do with, like you said earlier, of the Universal. That's why they changed it to Vaughn, and they probably couldn't use John Harkin or whatever his name was. So, like, I found that, like, there was some of those moments where I was frustrated. Overall, it was a little slower than I expected. So, like, I would like to rewatch it and kind of just get a take of it, because, like, I kind of had expectations and it was completely different from that. So, with that being said, I'm not mad that I watched this one, unlike the previous one. So.
Volchi, it's not. All right. I love it, man. Hell yeah. You know, Brooks was not a big horror guy at all. And he still says he's not. But this dude has watched so many horror films now. He's quite the expert. And I think that there's elements. It doesn't
feel like a horror movie.
No.
It doesn't feel like it today, but back in 1936 it was. You know, like for sure,
okay.
For certain, right? But I get what you're saying, right? Like a lot of people would say Bride of Frankenstein doesn't feel like a horror film, or maybe it feels more like a horror film than Dracula's Daughter, but it is about like this compulsion she has to like feed and this desire she has not to. And we'll get into all of that, but there's some really interesting characters and great performances in this movie. And one of the things I love about not just Universal monster movies from the 30s, but just film in general from the 30s and the 40s. There's something about the dialogue. There's something about that delivery, that transatlantic accent that everybody uses that nobody says. Like, it's not a real accent. It's like made up for Hollywood, right? This whole, like, you know, let me tell you something, Brooks, you know, you're going to get it tonight, man. You know, like that whole thing. I fucking love that shit. And I love it. And the movie looks great, but it's got some really great performances. Brooks, what's a character or a performance / I should say, what do you want to highlight?
Well, I really liked her Renfield in this movie. This is like, you know, he's a guy who's definitely, you know, inspired guys like Lurch and, you know, some other characters like that, you know, the kind of hulking manservant.
I was watching it with a dear friend of mine, and she was like, this dude is so fun. I was like, he's like the original Lurch, man. I literally said that. Like, I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah, he's so different from Renfield too, because he's like way too familiar with her, man. Like, he like taunts her, he fucks with her, like, you know, the shit that this dude says to her. Like, if Renfield had said that to Dracula would have like just picked him up and like shook him,
whooped his ass,
all his bones broke. So it feels like this guy has he kind of has a little bit of power in their relationship in a way, despite being, you know, the subordinate. You know, he feels like he's like, you know, he can throw his weight around a little bit more than the original Renfield does. And I don't think he ate any rats or flies or spiders in this movie, so
no,
at least he's eating well.
He did, and I love him. So that's the character is Xandor, portrayed by Irving Pitchell, who, if you look at any other movie he's in, doesn't come across this creepy or this like skeevy. I think when I did the Dracula's Daughter commentary, like 6-7 years ago, I mentioned, first of all, I was like, this must be like Severus Snape's grandfather, right? And then I was like, and also he's giving me these vibes of like Reefer Madness. You know, like, you know what I'm saying? Where she's like playing the music and she's like, it's a dark song. And he's like, no, bro, it's not. Like, no, it's filled with terror and horror. And he's such just a bastard in this movie, man. And there's a lot of shit involving that character is kind of underneath the script with his jealousy of her. Like, he wants to be with her. He also wants to be a vampire, and like it leads to the ultimate climax of the film. What about you, Fable? What's a performance you want to highlight?
You know, I actually really liked, and he was gone way too soon from the film. I like Officer Albert in the beginning of the movie. The guy was like, oh, oh, every time they discovered something in the beginning, and then they were in the I guess the precinct or whatever, and they're like, oh, they heard the noise and stuff. He's like, you go in there. Oh, you go in there. It's like, don't be a coward, man. He was like, you got to stay in and watch the corpses. Like, why don't you do it? I just like that guy.
You ain't got your stripes.
Yeah. I was sad when he like, I guess he died.
I think I like to think that he died or he just passed out. But that dude is in so many Universal movies from this era, man. He's in tons of them. He's in Bride, I think, actually, now I think about it.
I think we need more of him in this film, to be honest with you, to break up some of the more slower elements. It would have been cool for him to be like a little bumbling cop trying to figure this stuff out. But yeah, no, I really enjoyed his performance.
Hell yeah. What about you, Greg?
Man, I'm gonna go with Von Helsing. Like, I love that, he stuck to his guns. He's like, yeah, I stabbed him. And he's like, he basically is pleading with his lawyer, like, oh, I'm saying, he's like, they'll put you away in jail forever if you just are like, oh yeah, I just stabbed him. Because like you can't go off myth and rumors of like vampires as your alibi. And I think it was Von Helsing. So I'm gonna say it's him. He has the dopest line at the end where it's the dude's like, "Oh, she's so beautiful." He's like, "She was beautiful when she died 900 years ago." And I was just like, "Yeah." I was like, that's just like dope, like mic drop, because he's just kind of like, "What's up? I know they're vampires." I just loved how he stuck to his guns the whole time, and I think what this film lacked for me was there wasn't a lot of like memorable characters, and I think he played off of like from what I think he's only returning from the Dracula, right?
Yeah, Edward Van Sloan, same guy who played Van Helsing in Dracula, he's back again. Yeah,
I think like he had the most chemistry, like because he played off of those characters, like Bella's character Dracula, and who was the crazy Renfield or whatever. Like those people chopped up the scenery and like really stole the show in Dracula. And so I think he kind of brought that element over a little bit more in this one. So that's why he's my favorite.
Yeah, I love that Edward Van Sloan came back. Edward Van Sloan is great. He's also I think he's in Black Cat, which I love, with Bela Lugosi and Boris Karloff. David Manners, who played Jonathan Harker and Dracula's in that film. He was in the original Mummy movie with Boris Karloff. He played Dr. Mullen. I love Edward Van Sloan as Van Helsing, and I love him returning in this movie. And dude, one of my favorite things about this movie is exactly what you said, Greg, where he's just like, yeah, I stabbed this dude. He's a vampire, so I killed him. I saved the fucking world. And they're all like, you just killed this man. You're going to get... And so he doesn't even call a lawyer. He calls a psychologist. He calls his friend who's like a psychiatrist or
Prove
whatever.
me sane.
Yeah, and he's just like, I can't do this, bro. Like, they're going to put you away forever, dude. He's just like, well, if they put me away, then I'm happy that I did a service to humanity, right? I'm like, man.
He stuck to his guns. Like, I'm like, you know what? Kudos to him. He's just like, listen... He's old. He's like, I don't care. Like, I did what I needed to do.
Was the criminal justice system a little different in 1930s England? Because I'm a little confused. Like, he just got charged with double homicide, and he's running around.
Like a law about killing vampires on the books.
Yeah, he's just running around the whole movie. I mean, he's like all around. Did he go to Transylvania? It's like, how'd you leave the fucking state? Like, or the country?
Yeah, dude, he just kept going. Like Scotland Yard's got his ass, and then he's all like, you know what? You're a white dude. We'll let you out. We till the trial at least. Just do whatever you want, man.
He didn't do that to Puff Daddy. Money. He had bail. They just don't want to kill you.
Yeah, that's what I figured.
That bail. That's what it was, man. That's why he called his friend. He's like, this is the richest friend I know. He just happens to be a psychiatrist and not a lawyer. Hell yeah. For me, damn, there's so many good ones, man. Like, first of all, Margaret Churchill as Janet. I love her. Yeah. Very headstrong woman. And especially for film at this time, you don't typically see that, but I liked her. I also liked her dynamic with Odo Kruger, who plays Dr. Garth, who's kind of like the main character, I guess. But like, I was watching it with my girl, and she's like, this movie's rather sexist. I was like, well, it is 1936. I was like, yeah, it is. We're just lucky there's no blackface in it. So
the time it's scandalous is like, they have a woman using a telephone in a movie.
But my favorite performance is Gloria Holden as Zaleska, as Dracula's daughter. She didn't want to do this movie. At this time, you were under contract with your studio. Right? Like Universal, the reason why we see so many of the same people in the same movies from the same era, from the same studios, is because it was the studio system, right? Like Gloria was basically, her career was owned by Universal. They picked what movie she played in. right? That's how this worked back then, right? They told you, because you're under contract for like how many years or whatever. So they were like, you're going to be in Dracula's daughter. She didn't want to do it because, like I said, she was afraid of being typecast like Bela Lugosi. And that's one of the tragic things about Bela's life, is that he never kind of got out from under this role. And we've seen this with tons of people in modern horror, especially, right? Oh, one thing I was also going to say, I forgot to mention this. When I was talking about them trying to remake Dracula's daughter, that script eventually became Abigail. That movie, Abigail, started as a remake of Dracula's daughter. And they eventually just dropped the idea that it's Dracula, who is her father. But like, even while they were filming that movie, that was the idea, was that Abigail was like Dracula's daughter, and they were doing a remake of that. But Gloria Holden, maybe her disdain for the role adds something to it. She has this like this conflict that to me oozes forth, and I think it really elevates her performance. And I think she's great. I love her voice. I love the look of her. She feels regal and conflicted and scary and sexy at the same time. And I really, really appreciate that. This movie, though, style and structure, it oozes style. The movie is beautifully fucking shot, right? The director is Lambert Hillier, who had done a lot of things, including The Invisible Ray, some other Universal Monster stuff. He's most famously known as the man who directed the very first Batman serial. Not like breakfast cereal, but like, you know, the old black and white Batman serial that was played in theaters.
Mm-hmm.
He was the director of that. The look of this film is great, though.
You can't watch those in today's modern day.
Yeah, we'll get to them. Well, I got them. I got them on DVD and VHS.
Ooh, talk about racist.
Yeah, there's some crazy shit in that. But but I love the look of the film. Like when she is burning Dracula's corpse and doing that whole ceremony, that whole ritual where she's like, she believes she's going to be free now of this curse because the sire has passed away. I love that. I love the black and white. I mention this all the time, but when Mel Brooks did Young Frankenstein, he wanted to film it in black and white to replicate the look of these Universal monster movies. And none of the cinematographers that were working in the 70s knew how to light things like this, right? So they actually had to like go back and find an old guy to like teach and train people how to light the movie in a certain way. These Universal monster movies, including Dracula's daughter, just look absolutely gorgeous to me. You can stop almost any moment and it would work as like a piece of art, especially some of the more atmospheric moments involving her. Structure-wise, it's super short. It's an hour and 11 minutes. It does drag a little bit, though. And I think the reason why the structure drags is because it is doing this comedic thing. It's trying to do its Bride of Frankenstein, but it doesn't blend the horror and the more comedic humanist elements quite like James Whale is able to do. And I think it does slow the film up a little bit. So I don't think it's perfect. I think style is top notch, but structure, it's got a little bit it could work on. But you know what? I still enjoy it. What about you, Brooks? What do you think about the style and structure?
Well, it's very much like, you know, a movie that would be at home and within the, you know, the old Universal Monsters shared universe. You know, it's a movie that I think would fit in perfectly with, like, you know, the Wolfman and Frankenstein and House of Frankenstein, all those movies. But like, you know, it's a shame they never used this character again, really. Like, you know, but you know, in a way, like, I don't know how well she'd fit in, you know, different movies. Like, you know, it seemed to be like kind of her one and done, I guess. But in a way, it's kind of like the end of Dracula too. So like, it couldn't be canon because you need Dracula to come back, and you can't do that if he's like, you know, all burnt up. But yeah, it is very much a Universal monster movie, and like, you know, I love it. Like, you know, it's very different too from like the first Dracula or any of the other monster movies, and that it's about, you know, a monster who's actually kind of trying to, like, on a redemption arc of sorts, in a way, sort of. It's like, you know, it's not, she doesn't come off as like she feels guilty about what she's done, but she does seem like she wants to, you know, do something better, you know, like she wants to be better than she was. And, you know, maybe she sees the compulsion to like to drink blood as a curse, you know, like she's kind of a human monster in a way. Like, she knows she's a monster and she wants to not be a monster. But at the same time, like, you know, you gotta eat. So yeah, like, this movie is pretty interesting, you know, when you think about it.
Hell yeah, you got to eat. You know.
Right, man.
What about you,
And
Fable? What do
got
you think about the
drinks on
style and
board.
structure?
I mean, the style is okay for me. I don't really have a reference point outside of the Wolfman and Creature from the Black Lagoon to like really compare it, or maybe Frankenstein,
Or some
which I
mummy
haven't seen.
movies. I know you were a
Yeah,
big
I've seen the Mummy. Yeah.
Mummy Monday guy back in the day.
You know, they're the sets are very sparse. They're very far and few between. You know, the one you mentioned where she's doing the ritual, that looked pretty cool. You know, her castle, they only showed like maybe one room in the castle, but it was pretty cool. The underground where they discover Von Helsing killing Renfield, you know, there's not too many of those in this film. But if I had to, like, if I gravitated to one thing in the style, it would be the costuming. It would be the you know the suits they were wearing and the clothes they were wearing. I thought they did that very well. The dresses that the women were wearing, I thought looked really cool. Like Homeboy's assistant, she had like this like polka dotish kind of like dress on, and I'm like, oh, okay, they were rocking shit like that back in. You know what I mean? I was just looking at the style of dress that they were doing, and it
Yeah.
stood out a lot for me. Especially Dracula's daughter too. Like I said, that little number she had where it was wrapping around her chest. I was like, that's a pretty badass dress for 1936. So that really jumped out at me. As far as structure, as short as it is, it's still a little slow, which is saying a lot, right? Because you would think something this short wouldn't feel that way, but it kind of does. But at the same time, it makes me look at other movies that are way longer. Like, guys, you couldn't tell your story in the amount of time that these people told this. I mean, they gave you the love, not a triangle, but like a quadrangle. Like it was like 4 people in love here, and they gave you everything you needed to know in only an hour and 12 minutes, and that to me is something to be studied, like by modern filmmakers. Like you can tell your story and not have a 2 hour and 15 minute, you know what I mean? Epic here. You can do this much quicker. So I admired that about it. But yeah, style and structure is okay.
Hell yeah. What about you, Greg?
I mean, to go off what Fable says, it reminds me of just that era of storytelling, right? Like comics were not these long saga of continuing stuff. They were one issue, one and done kind of things. They're almost like one shot comic in and of itself. And this was, you know, I appreciate that of like, if you can, you know, if you can tell a story in an anthology in 3 pages and be compelling, kudos to you. So this was a lot of stuff that you all have said, right? Like the style I thought was good. I thought it was unique of it just fit into this universe that they created. But it did feel like it dragged at a couple points where it was just like, I don't know what it was missing. Like if I, you know, like you don't need like a courtroom scene or anything, but like it needed something else there, or maybe a little bit more of the horror action aspect of it. There was just something there that I think with at least like Dracula, you had the the presence that Dracula just brought to the screen. And I don't think you had that as much there. So it couldn't cover up for some of the just like the more drier moments of the film. So for me, it was trying to figure out like, does it, did it even need to be an hour, 12 minutes? What could they, or if not, what could they have added to, yes, make it longer, but make it feel like it was, not slowing down. So I think there's a little bit of that too, that you have to try and figure out and look at. But I thought for what it was doing, like, I think Robbie was talking about just the gorgeousness of it being shot, of like, if you pause the movie, like, there's moments that are always going to pop out and stand, and like, wow, that's an impressive time. But for the most part, for me, like, I really did like it. I thought the structure of the story for the most part was compelling concept, right? And an idea to go right off of the sequel or right off the original movie. And I don't know, but that seems like a very bold move in movie times, just anything to be like, we're going to do a sequel to Dracula without Dracula. No, I mean, you get your wax figure for 2 seconds that, in the coffin, but no movie, no. And I'm assuming most horror movies, that's why you got like Jeepers Creepers 18 and stuff like that, like, and Freddy 35 and like, No movie just
I
is like,
wish
cool,
they made 35 Freddy movies.
we're gonna do a sequel to this horror movie franchise that you all love with a character as iconic as Dracula, and is gonna have Dracula in the name, but Dracula is not gonna be in
Not
there
in the
at all.
movie.
Like, so like that almost like that it was a compelling enough movie for me to take out the most compelling character in the franchise. That bumps it up a little bit for me right there for style and structure too. Like, because I feel like that's a bold move, and so I was like, man, kudos to them.
Yeah, 100%. I like that you said that. You know, they did initially intend on Bela Lugosi returning as Dracula in this movie. But then they just went in a different direction. And I think that's one of the better parts of it. You know, like Bride of Frankenstein still has the monster, still has Dr. Frankenstein. They're just adding new characters like, of course, the Bride and Dr. Pretorius, right? But in this one, they're like, yeah, you know, no Dracula, like you said, just the wax figure, which is, by the way, the first time we saw Dracula with the stake in his heart. Right? Because you don't see that in the original because all that's off camera. But it looks gorgeous, but it does slow up at times. And it could be a little bit like, once again, comparing it to Bride of Frankenstein, which this movie is trying to be Bride of Frankenstein, but for Dracula, right? It doesn't quite hit that level, but it hits a level higher than most Universal sequels did, right? Especially things like, I mean, I think the best Universal Monster sequels are Bride of Frankenstein, Dracula's Daughter, and The Mummy's Hand. And The Mummy's Hand isn't even really a sequel to the original Mummy. It's like the start of a whole new franchise, a whole new mummy, all that shit. We'll get to that. By the way, if you are curious, 5 years ago, I did this thing called Mummy Monday. I did all of the Universal Mummy movies. I did commentaries to all of them. And that's one of my favorite franchises.
Can I say one thing?
Yeah.
No, you can't.
I think
Robbie, go ahead.
I think the title kind of lets this movie down as well, to be honest with you. I mean, we were talking about Chud, right? The other night, and we were like, Chud is kind of a stupid name for a movie that's better than what it seems like when you read the title Chud, right? When you see Chud, you're like, what kind of garbage is this? And then you watch.
I told you my mom wouldn't let me rent it because she was like, Chode. We're not watching a movie called Chode.
Then you're watching Chud and you're like, oh, this movie has like environmental messages in it and messages about poverty and shit like that. This is way better than a movie that should be called Chud. So I think Dracula's Daughter is kind of in the same vein for the simple fact that it's like, you know that this is Dracula's daughter through the whole movie. So you're like, maybe what Bearded is saying, you're kind of expecting a little more in the horror aspect and in the Dracula aspect. And nobody knows that she's Dracula's daughter in the movie, right? Like in the movie, nobody knows that this is his daughter.
Until the end, right?
And then she says it, and it feels like such a twist, but that isn't really a twist because you knew that going in. So it's like, I don't know.
That's a cast list at the beginning of the movie.
Yeah, I think the title just does it a little bit of disservice. But, you know, maybe that's just me looking from 2025 lens to a movie in the 1930s. So I can't really, fault it for that.
I love that moment though, where she goes, I am Dracula's daughter.
That would have been,
it's like, dun, dun, dun.
Yeah, if
it's
this
like
would have been like a Transylvania, like call it something else. And then she says that shit, it would have been like, oh shit, like no wonder. But yeah.
I think the original script involved Van Helsing, after killing Dracula, going to Transylvania to kill the brides. Right? Because those brides are still there because they're never dealt with in that original movie, right? Those brides are still there. And the original script, I think he goes back, kills the 3 brides, but there's a 4th coffin that he forgets about or doesn't go to. And that's where Dracula's daughter rises and all this kind of shit. And then there's this question, like, is it actually his daughter? Like, did he sire, or is it just somebody he sired? And then when Van Helsing mentions that Dracula's like 500 years old, but she's like 100 years old, it kind of gives you the context that she's somebody he turned, but like wasn't quite a bride in a way. Like, I don't know, but I think we've had a great conversation so far. Let's talk about the music. Heinz Rohmheld did the music. We will know him from 1930s All Quiet on the Western Front. I'm a big fan of that movie, and I think the score to that movie is really good. He did Murders in the Rue Morgue, even though he's not credited for that. He's uncredited for The Invisible Man. And he's done a lot of interesting things. He did Werewolf of London, which is 1935. In fact, that's the only one of these like first era Universal monster movies that we haven't done yet is Werewolf of London. So I guess we're doing that one next year. Because I was like, where do we go next year? Do we do Son of Frankenstein, Son of Dracula? The other thing I like about the film, by the way, getting back away from the music for a second, is at this time, maybe it's because of the success of Bride of Frankenstein, and that's something that's inherent in the novel Frankenstein, is that the monster coerces the doctor into making a bride for him because he's alone, right? He's alone. But, eventually we get Son of Frankenstein, Son of Dracula. It's all like male oriented. This is a very brief period in the 30s where these are female led movies. And more so than Bride of Frankenstein is Dracula's Daughter. This is led by a woman. And you don't typically see that. And I think that's cool. But the music I like. So at this time, a lot of stock music was used for film, right? And in the silent era, obviously there was no music, right? People would actually like play music while the movie was being performed, right? So in 1931, when they reissued Hunchback of Notre Dame, Hines did the score for that. And it's a beautiful score. But the score, it's very light. There's like, I don't know, like maybe 10, 12 minutes worth of music that's played with here. And Bride of Frankenstein is like one of the first films where it had an elaborate score where every character had their own theme and the themes overlapped and worked together. This is not that, but the music is awesome. I love the music in this film. It's chilling. It's not just stock music. It's made for this film. You can feel that. It's earned. It's deserved. And I think Hines is an underappreciated film composer from this era because a lot of us don't consider film music from this era because so much of it was stock music and so little of it is utilized in the film. But I think the music is utilized perfectly well. It's not quite on the level of Bride. That seems to be my recurring theme tonight. But I do like the music. And especially when you think about Universal monster movies, a lot of their music is kind of just thrown together, whatever works, kind of like a George A. Romero kind of vibe to it. And I'm not saying this is Goblin, or nothing like that, but it does push horror movie music composition a little bit further. So I do appreciate it for that. What do you think about the music, Brooks?
I like the music of this one. It's very much what I associate with the Universal kind of monster movies kind of soundtrack. Very string heavy. It has like it can be dark and foreboding, but it can be like light at the when they're doing the comedy, with the doofus cop and all that. So yeah, it's like it's a good soundtrack for this movie. It's like very much like Dracula didn't really have that, the first Dracula, but like if it had it, I imagine it would have sounded a lot very similar to this soundtrack.
Yeah, one of my favorite things about the original Dracula is there is no score, right? It's just silent. Like I love, and it just adds an element to it. But the music adds an element to it. I don't think it would work. This movie wouldn't work without a score, right? Dracula is like the outlier, and it's mostly because Todd Browning directed silent films, and this was the very first talkie supernatural film and the very first talkie film he ever directed, right? And so you didn't know the importance of music, and now music is sometimes overutilized to the point where you watch Dracula and it's almost refreshing to be like, there's no music in this movie. You just let the silence fucking build the atmosphere. But this movie, I think it's got solid music. What about you, Fable?
I love this kind of music. I this is some of my favorite type of music in movies. This kind of like orchestral, like informs every move you make kind of thing. Like, they go dun dun, they look around, they go dun dun dun.
I am Dracula's daughter.
Like, everything they do has like some sort of fucking orchestral riff to it. Sort of like a Looney Tunes cartoon, right? Like a Chuck Jones cartoon. Like everything they do has like a I don't know. I love this kind of shit. It's what made me love another movie that we did for Horrorfest, Necronomicon. Necronomicon felt like it had this kind of soundtrack to it, where it's just I don't know. I can't describe it, but I love this kind of thing, and I wish they would have this kind of thing more in modern movies, especially horror movies, man. They've gone with the live music and stuff like that, but I'd love to go back to the strings a little bit back to the orchestra, the little informed music where it just paints every movement. So yeah, I have no reference for it. Even if you told me it was stock music, I would have said I still loved it because I just love this kind of style of music. So yeah, no, I dug it.
Yeah, love that vibe. I love that you mentioned Necronomicon. By the way, we covered that like a week or two ago on One Collection Down on your channel, Fable.
Mhm.
I had never seen it. When I met Jeffrey Combs, like that was the week after, like that was the week that we had done that show. So I like when I met him, I was like, man, I just watched Necronomicon. And he was just like, oh my God, I hated being in that movie. He was like, I was like, what? And he's like, no, I don't like H.P. Lovecraft. I think he's like a nerdy, not cool kind of personality. He's like, I didn't want to do it, but they were like, you got to do it, Jeffrey, because you're associated with H.P. Lovecraft. And he goes, well, I guess I am. I think I am now. Fuck, I guess I got to do it. And I was like, yeah, you played H.P. Lovecraft and Edgar Allan Poe. How does that feel? And he goes, actually, that does feel pretty good.
That's pretty badass. Yeah.
Hell yeah. What about you, Greg? What do you think about the music in the film?
This is the one part that doesn't hold up for me. Like going back to a movie, I get it. It's a 1936 movie, so almost 100 years ago. Man, I completely disagree with Fable. I beg that they don't do music scores like this anymore. Like, dun, dun, dun. Like I don't want that in my movies at all, unless it's like a parody or a spoof of it, because it just doesn't feel natural to me. I think we've leveled up the game. Like I'm sure I don't have a lot of context like for 1936 orchestra scores and soundtracks like this, but I would say I feel like we have leveled up in the score ability with movies moving forward, right? Like I think what they add to the element, and that it doesn't have to be this like, it doesn't have to cue you onto what you should feel and know. Like the music does it in a more subtle way, I think, nowadays, where it's not as like, this is like, you should look up here now because of the noise and stuff. Like it just feels forced, and I don't like that in those movies. So this is where it feels like, of all of the movie, this is the most dated part of the movie for me, is the music and the score.
Okay. I think contextually I get what you're saying, but contextually, like film scores are new at this moment, right?
Yeah.
And I get what you're saying 100%. And I'm not saying that you're wrong, because you're right, because your opinion is your opinion, right?
Mm-hmm.
But one thing I will say is that, yeah, I wish movie scores were not so in your face now and obvious, right? Because like every movie today is like, womp, womp. My point being, like, they still do that in a lot of movies, right? Where like they like force you to pay attention through the music. Like everything now wants to be Hans Zimmer Inception, right? Like look at any movie trailer and all you hear is womp.
I mean, I understand what you're saying, and maybe it's the score itself, but like every Steven Spielberg film, just about every George Lucas film is scored this way. I mean, it might be a leveled up,
John Williams
version.
Yeah.
I think it's the more the context of the type of score it is for me. It just feels dated.
Yeah. And it should, right? Because it's 1936, and we've heard way better versions of this kind of shit. But when I'm saying informed music, I mean like, you take the music out of Star Wars, it's a stupid ass movie. You take the music out of Jurassic Park, it's a dumbass movie. You know what I mean? You add those scores to Indiana Jones.
I don't know if I'm gonna say it's a dumb movie. I'm gonna say it might lose some effect, but I don't want to be.
It don't hit as hard when he goes, "Welcome to Jurassic Park."
You're not wrong. I'm just.
I agree. Yeah, I agree with Fable.
Yeah, come on.
Especially John Williams. Like Jaws is not Jaws without John Williams' score.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
And Psycho is not Psycho without Bernard Herrmann. Right. And think of it, Psycho was done 25 years after this movie. Yeah. And like that's the period it takes. Like film is still growing up. Film's very new at this time, right? It's only been around for like 35 years, and talking films have only been around for 5 years, right? At this point. So like, but I get what you're saying, Greg. I do. And I get what you're saying. Like we're all right and we're all wrong. Let's just agree with that.
It's kind of like, it's kind of like, I'm sure, Robbie, if you go back to your first YouTube video 10 years ago, it's not bad, but you've learned and you've grown from there. I'm saying they've done that with scores, right? It was good for what it was, but I think we've learned and grown from there.
Yeah, and they had even done a score that was superb right before this, which was Bride of Frankenstein. And like, Greg, you should watch Frankenstein and Bride of Frankenstein. We've already covered those, so we're not doing those again, but like, you should watch them because those two movies, James Whale is the best director of the 1930s. Like, he is brilliant. And he was an out gay man in the 30s who was incredibly successful. And then eventually that success collapsed in on itself. And there's a really great movie from the 90s that is about James Whale at the end of his life, starring Brendan Fraser and Ian McKellen as James Whale, called Gods and Monsters. And we got to cover that on this channel, because if anybody's never seen Gods and Monsters,
no, but it sounds right up my alley.
It's fucking great. It's such a good movie. And it's James Whale at the end of his life. Brendan Fraser plays like a pool boy, and he's trying to like catch glimpses of him and stuff, but he's also just kind of telling, because James Whale also committed suicide. That's how he passed, right? Because he had this incredible time in the 30s. Like, you know, I guess what we call it now is final cut, right? When a director is at a certain level and he gets final cut, like, I get the full on say in what happens in this movie. The studio doesn't. James Whale was the first person to ever have that. And it's because of his incredible legacy. Frankenstein, Bride of Frankenstein, The Old Dark House, and The Invisible Man, fucking brilliant films. But also things like, he did a sequel to All Quiet on the Western Front called Journey's End, which is fucking phenomenal, that a lot of people don't talk about or even know, and it's really hard to find. But I love this era of cinema. I love seeing things in the very beginning. It's like, I love what you mentioned, Greg, like reading comics from the 30s, right? And how everything's like self-contained, one and done. Hell, not even, it even goes beyond that. Like, if you go read a Batman comic in the 30s, you're reading like a 10-page Batman comic and then 60 pages of some other bullshit. You know what I'm saying? Like, you know, and it's interesting to see how our favorite mediums, like how our favorite media like grows and develops, right? And the music is a big part. And you're right, man. Like, the music's not quite there yet, but it does help, like Fable said, influence what's to come.
Yeah.
Right. And there's not Psycho, there's not Jaws without the work that was done.
A lot of the soundtracks that I'm sure the guys like a John Williams or Danny Elfman and all the guys that I'm talking about that have an evolution form of this sort of music were fans of these Universal monster movies. I'm almost willing to bet Steven Spielberg cut his teeth watching these movies and it informed his whole style. So we got away from that a little bit in the 2010s. Not to say not everything is like that, but you know what I mean? You know what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. Everything like in the 2000s is like boom, 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 boom. You wouldn't steal a car, would you?
And it's also what makes all of those soundtracks unforgettable, because all of us here, if you're an 80s baby, you know the Jurassic Park theme in your head. You know the Indiana Jones theme in your head. You know the Superman theme in your head. These are all orchestral things that I think were influenced by these 1950s, 1930s, you know what I mean? Soundtracks or whatever.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, 100%. All right, let's go to the theme of the film. We are the pop culture philosophers. We like to dive a little bit deeper. Brooks, what is Dracula's daughter saying to you?
Well, I think the movie is very much about like trying to get out from under the shadow of a parent, I guess, in a way. It's like, you know, it seems like the main character, like, you don't learn much about her, but she seems like she was sheltered in a way. She felt like she was in prison, like she couldn't go out in the real world. And now, you know, that she felt like, you know, her father was the one who was keeping her from, you know, realizing her full potential, or, you know, being her true self. And now she feels like, you know, since he's gone, she can try. And, you know, she doesn't succeed ultimately. But I think it, like, you know, it's noble that she at least was like, you know, my dad, he was kind of an asshole. I don't want to be like him. It's kind of like, you know, that's kind of a classic story of, you know, a kid who's like has a parent who's not maybe bad or just not as good as they could have been, and like, you know, deciding, you know, I'm going to at least try to be better. And you don't always succeed, but at least you try.
Hell yeah, I like that. What about you, Fable? What's this movie speaking to you?
You can't force love. Love is a natural thing that comes naturally. You got to let it cook. You got to let it happen. You can't make it happen, because every time you try to make it happen, it never turns out the way you want. And I think every character besides the main guy, I'm sorry, I forget his name. The
Dr.
psychiatrist. Yeah, Garth. Everybody besides him is trying to force their love on somebody. Like, you know what I mean? Dracula's daughter's trying to force her love on him. His assistant is trying to kind of force her love on her. Her Renfield guy, he's trying to force his love on her, kind of thing. And they ultimately end up getting ignored. And it isn't until that's kind of dropped that Garth kind of like, I don't know if he falls for his assistant, but he kind of realizes how much he cares for her. You know what I mean? So you just can't force these things. They have to come naturally.
Hell yeah, I like that. What about you, Bearded? What do you think this movie is saying to you?
I mean, I think it's trying to be a little ahead of its time of, being true to who you are, to yourself, right? Like you mentioned the, first on-screen kind of like the lesbian undertones of, that were like sensual. You're like, oh, I think there is a little bit of that. Like the showrunners were writing a little bit of into the situation there of like, there's a, no matter what our parents try to make us be, like Brooks kind of said, no matter what society tries to make us be, like, you're going to be who you are, and I thought that was kind of like for a night, I picked up like it subtly for like a 1936 way, right? Like it's not very much for us today. It wouldn't be like in your face, but I think then like if there was a Karen that wanted to ban a movie, I could see them wanting to ban this because of that, right? Like they like this would be like people upset with Lightyear, right? And stuff like that. So I thought this was a little bit ahead of its time on those aspects of just kind of like, you are who you are and you have to try to navigate your life throughout that. And so I thought that's kind of cool. So
hell yeah. That lesbian seduction scene, by the way, they turned in the script to the censor board. So this is still like kind of a pre-code movie, like, but it's not, because there was like a British like censor board or whatever. And they looked at it and they read the script and they're like, you cannot film this movie as it's written in this scene. Because in the scene, like, she is posing nude. It's implied she's posing nude and all this stuff. Like, no, we can't. And what's crazy is I think Tarantino said this. He's like, even with all that shit removed, it's still incredibly suggestive for 1936, right? And even today we watch it and we're like, he's like, yeah, you'll hear snickers in the audience, but most of us will realize what's happening here and how significant this is, right?
Well, isn't that how it always happens with censorship, right? Like half the time, like, take it back to comics, right? DC wanted to censor the Green Lantern, how they were killing Kyle Rayner's girlfriend with the fridge. Like, you can't show that scene, and it makes it almost worse by the little bit that they do show.
Yeah,
because they censored it. And I think you're right. Like, there is some of that.
Yeah, we brought up Jaws a lot tonight, and in particular about the score. But like, the shark animatronic shark was like fucking up. So they were like, well, fuck, we can't use the shark as much, and it actually makes the movie better. With the more of what's implied than what is shown.
Yeah, sometimes less is more.
Yeah, exactly. So to me, though, and I love what everybody said here, but to me, what this movie is speaking to me is the self-loathing nature of addiction, right? Those of us who struggle with addictive personalities, it's easy to beat yourself up about it, right? And for instance, let's just say, alcoholism, right? Let's say alcoholism. There is a genetic factor to alcoholism, right? There's something genetic that gets passed down from person to person, right? And somebody who's really battling that, they can see it as the sins of the father, the sins of the mother, or anything like that. But they can also, usually what happens is everybody goes, oh, fuck, I'm a piece of shit. I can't quit this. I can't stop it. I have this compulsion to do this certain thing, whether it's alcohol, whether it's drugs, whether it's sex, whether it's work. Like, there's so many addictions that people get wrapped up in, right? And they beat themselves up over it, right? And one of the silliest things in this fucking movie And one of the things I love is how fucking far psychology has come, right? Because like the doctor at the beginning, he's like, the way that we treat alcoholism is we put a alcoholic in a room filled with alcohol. And if they got the willpower, they'll make it. Willpower is all we need. But that's wrong. That's a fallacy, man. Like sometimes we need to understand the underneath factors, whether it's genetic, whether it's taught and learned, right? So I love the idea that she has inherited this thirst, this addiction, this hunger from her father. And so, yeah, like Brooke said, you can deal with that, right? Just as a father and a daughter, and like the sins of the father upon the daughter and trying to get over it. But you can also just see and you can look at the temptation, right? Where she's trying to like break free of this, but at the same time, she's putting herself in situations where it's not going to be easy. Plus, she has the supreme enabler living with her, right? You know, the guy, like, she's like, I've burned my father's corpse. I'm free from this curse. And he's like, no, you're not. You want to feed. Dark angels are spreading their wings over you right now. He doesn't say anything that poetic, but you get what I'm saying. He's like the creepiest fucking dude. So I think it is, and I think this is what Anne Rice was talking about when she said this movie directly inspires the Vampire Chronicles. This is the first loathing vampire that we have, because Dracula doesn't hate being a vampire. And a lot of vampire fiction from this point forward, until we get to like things like Martin, maybe in the 70s, and Anne Rice making her novels, like, yeah, being a vampire is fucking cool. Nobody's self-loathing in the fucking Lost Boys. They all want to be vampires, except for like Michael, right? But you see that here. She hates herself. And I think for 1936, that's a rather ahead of its time and bold theme to approach. So addiction is a disease, and anybody with a disease like addiction, or even like an actual like virus disease or something like that, like AIDS victims, you know, back in the 80s and early 90s, like there's this element of self-loathing that would happen. Oh, maybe if I wasn't promiscuous, or maybe if I wasn't homosexual, like I wouldn't have gotten this, right? And that's something that society also places on us, right? So I love this, because this is, to me, one of the first movies I've ever seen that's about self-loathing and how that applies to addiction and life and family and all kinds of things like that. So that's what it's about to me. Metal Elf says, addiction is not a trait. It's a disease that hijacks the pleasure-seeking parts of the brain. 100%. Mm-hmm. And I think this movie's actually rather ahead of its time talking about these themes. All right, now it's time to rate this film out of 5 possible you digs. You out there in the chat, if you watched along with Dracula's Daughter, what do you rate the film? Brooks, kick us off here on the panel.
I like this movie a lot, but like you said, it's not like, if you rated it next to like Bride of Frankenstein, not quite as good. I'd give this one I'd give it a 4.5, probably a little more than usual. I'm giving it the Horrorfest bump, but yeah, not perfect, but you know, still a good movie. And if you like Dracula, if you're into vampire stuff, you'll definitely want to check this one out, I would think.
Hell yeah.
It'd be like a required viewing.
4.5 from Brooks. That's with the Horrorfest bump, and I appreciate that. We're always welcome to use the 0.5 Horrorfest bump, of course. You can bump whatever you want. You can even bump it up for spite if you wanted to.
But
like Robbie did against me.
Fable, what about you, man? What do you rate the film?
He used all the bumps. I forgot on what movie.
You're like 3 one night.
Fucking bump it up.
That was what movie was that? That was fuck, which one was that?
He used the spite bump, the Horrorfest bump. There was another bump. He bumped it
I did a spite bump, a Horrorfest bump, and that was Slumber Party Massacre.
Yeah.
That was one of the Slumber Party Massacre.
You did it. You did at least 2 of those bumps with me though, when on our
City of the Living Dead.
Because I gave it like a 1, and you're like, you can't have that.
Like, I gotta balance this fucking shit out, man. Anyway, Fable, what do you rate this film?
I thought it was a decent film. I don't get the horror too much. The comedy is just okay. To me, it's a vampire love story, which is fine, right? Like that's not anything bad. I don't really find too much to fault with this film, but if I had to like compare it to the other few Universal monster movies that I have seen, it's not on that level. It's no Wolfman, it's no Mummy, it's no, you know what I mean? Like those movies, even though they're not my favorite movies, I could understand how they spawned a fandom or you know what I mean, or influence throughout the decades. To me, this is just just a regular. This would be a direct to cassette. Like if VHS existed back then, this would have came out on video. I'm gonna give it a 3, but you know what, Horrorfest, you know, I'll do it. 3.5. Let's do it. 3.5.
Hell yeah, man.
I mean, you knocked us straight to DVD, straight to VHS release, but Return of Jafar slaps. So, like,
Return Jafar does slap, man. I like
So,
that.
like, you can
Hey,
say straight to
some
VHS.
some of my favorite movies are 3s, bro. You know, we love them, but we gotta be real too. You know what I'm saying? So
That's true.
yeah, no, 3.5.
3.5 from Fable. What about you, Greg?
Again, I thought this was a much better movie than my last horror movie. It had a plot, it had a story, it had a beginning and an end. So it made sense. So that alone is good. I thought it was good. I gave it a solid 3.25 kind of, you know, but I'm gonna give it the it's ahead of its time bump by it saying, you know what? I'm making up my own bump tonight, Robbie. I don't even know if that's allowed, but I'm going to make my own bump up. And it's because the fact that it was a horror sequel to Dracula without Dracula in it, and it still was good. I'm giving it a 3.75.
All right.
Ooh,
Hell yeah, I
wow.
like that. 3.75. For me, I'm right there with Brooks. I'm giving it a 4.5. Bride of Frankenstein gets a 5 for me. Dracula gets a 5. Frankenstein gets a 5. The Mummy gets a 5. Wolfman gets a 5. Creature from the Black Lagoon gets a 5. Like, I love these fucking films. And I know that this film is not quite what it could be or what it should be, but it is ahead of its time, like Greg said. It is very influential, like Fable said. And it does still carry the spirit of these films, like Brooks said. So for me, I'm going 4.5. That's with the Horrorfest bump. I think the movie's brilliant. Could be better, could be remade better, but honestly, if you really want to see this movie done in a sexier way, check out Hammer Horror's Vampire Lovers, which I would recommend to anybody, especially if you are a man who likes women sexually. You know, I would recommend that. But also just read Carmilla, and Sue Lee just did a series of graphic novels based on Carmilla, which is absolutely great. And Carmilla is one of the biggest influences on vampire fiction that nobody talks about because it predates Dracula, and it also has a really solid, like, thematic and way ahead of its time thematically as well, I should say. So a 4.5 from me and from Brooks, a 3 from Fable, or 3.5 from Fable, 3.75 from Greg. That's a PCP average of 4.069. You digs, y'all. So seems like we like these Universal monster movies. We do one every year for Horrorfest, and I think next year is going to be Werewolf of London because we haven't done that one yet. Their first werewolf movie where it's all about like a fucking flower or some shit like that. Like Batman Begins owes a lot to Werewolf of London. But thus concludes our review of Dracula's Daughter. But don't worry, Horrorfest is nowhere near done this week. We continue here on PCP Movie Night tomorrow night, 8 p.m. Central Time with the Monster Squad. Very, very pumped for that. I love this film. It was one of my favorite films as a kid. Join us in the crew. We also have a special appearance from the Uncanny Omar from Near Mint Condition. This is also one of his favorite films. So he's joining us for his first PCP Movie Night. On Tuesday night, Fable is going to be talking about 30 Days of Night, another vampire movie. Of course, it's based on a graphic novel by Steve Niles and Ben Templesmith. Also on Tuesday night, Dylan is wrapping up Horrorfest on his side with the Night of the Living Dead, the uncensored, uncut Tom Savini movie, the new version that was just released on DVD. On Wednesday night, we have our finale of Horrorfest here on PCP Movie Night with the Chucky franchise. That's going to be fun. And then the last show for Horrorfest this year is going to be over at Blood Splatter Chatter on Thursday night as they talk about John Carpenter's The Thing. So lots of great movies coming up. Monday night, The Monster Squad. Tuesday night, 30 Days a Night and Night of the Living Dead, the Tom Savini directed version from the early 90s starring Tony Todd. The Chucky franchise on Wednesday night and The Thing by John Carpenter on Thursday night. Brooks, thank you so much for being here. Final thoughts?
Me and Jelani did Go Figure reviews, and this week we did the 2-pack Omega Red and War Machine. I don't think he sent you anything, but I don't know if he's even finished it yet. But it's in the pipe, I guess you could say. And if I guess I could do a quote from the movie, "Why did you lie?"
All right. Fable, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate you filling in for some people that couldn't make it tonight. Final thoughts, man.
Final thoughts. Thank you as always for making me a part of these movie reviews. Even though I may or may not like some of the films we watch, I appreciate all of them because I just love film and I love seeing what, different perspectives are on these films. So I really appreciate that. Definitely come back this Tuesday, 9 p.m. Eastern over on my channel for 30 Days of Night. I don't know if it's the only comic book based movie that we've done for Horrorfest. But that's a pretty cool aspect of that film is that it's based on the comic books that we love. And Steve Niles is a pretty awesome horror writer, in my opinion. So come check that out. Got a great squad joining me. And yeah, come hang out for the rest of Horrorfest. Blood Splatter Chatter, Dylan's Horror Show, and of course, Pop Culture Philosophers. It's been great, man. Hope to see you guys there.
Hell yeah. Greg, thank you so much for being here and joining us for Horrorfest this year. I can't wait to have you on more movie reviews outside of just things like Super Mario Brothers or Dick Tracy or whatever. So,
dude,
I'm excited.
I mean, I love those. Don't get me wrong, because they're great. And have we done Three Ninjas yet? Because we need to.
No, we need to. We do.
Okay.
And when we do, I'm calling you, bro.
Yeah, and next year I'm definitely holding it against Greg that he did Dracula's Daughter. Next time I offer him a Horrorfest movie. He said,
what did I do? What did I turn you down?
Horrorfest, all of it. I sent you the list.
I probably was busy, dude. You probably sent me on. You probably sent me on days that I couldn't do it. That's all.
Yeah, he looked at that list. He was like, "Fuck no, I'm not doing it."
That probably also. I was probably also. Robbie sent me the list back in like May, so like I also had probably already committed to Robbie. I'm like, I don't know if I can do more than 2 horror movies. That's almost double my quota for my life. So like, that's a lot. But no, it's good. I'm in my Dracula era right now. I watched Dracula, watched Dracula's Daughter. I ended up watching Bram Stoker's Dracula, the Gary Oldman. And I got that movie adaptation comic book when I was at a con this weekend because I was like, I got to get that.
Mike
Mignola artwork on that.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah.
Bram Stoker's Dracula is so good.
And then if you are a fan of Dracula on my channel, I just had an interview with Matt Wagner and Kelly Jones, and they are, I think there still is, I think it's the Kickstarter still going on, I think this week, but they are doing basically the stuff that's mentioned in Bram Stoker's Dracula book, but like that's never touched on. Like, so the first volume, it was all about like Dracula has a basically like a school, not Dracula, the devil has a school competition. I forget they mentioned it in the book and no one ever explores it. So Matt Wagner's like, I'm going to. And then the second one they did was all about the brides. And then this one is how the hell does he become a count? Like, like who decides that Dracula is a count now? And so like, it's a really cool. So if you like Dracula stuff, go check out that, but alone it's a conversation with Matt Wagner and freaking Kelly Jones. And then I got an interview with Kenny Porter and Mike Becker tomorrow dropping for their new book from Mad Cave. So about the new space age. So interviews every Monday night. So yeah.
Hell yeah. All right. And for my final thoughts, just join us tomorrow night for Monster Squad. Join Fable Tuesday night for 30 Days of Night. Join Dylan for Night of the Living Dead. Join us here on Wednesday night for the Chucky franchise and the grand finale, John Carpenter's The Thing, over at Blood Splatter Chatter on Thursday night. All right, we're dipping out. Love you guys. Station, pop, pop, boo. And for my final thoughts, I am Dracula's daughter. Bum, bum, bum. What? Get it.